Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Osborne, and I'm here today to show you or to help teach you how to take your pantry gluten-free. This is one of the first steps that's crucial in being able to maintain and live a gluten-free lifestyle. So we're going to go through this pantry, and we're going to look at some of the different labels and some of the different products. And some things are going to be quite obvious, and other things are going to be less obvious, and we're going to try to point out and guide you in terms of how to recognize where gluten is and what things you need to start looking for to determine whether or not you're getting that incidental gluten exposure or that less obvious gluten exposure. So as you can see here, I'm pointing right here, this first item is a can of cream of chicken soup. And so as I turn it over and we look at the label, first thing is first, we see a number of different ingredients, but one of the first things that we see in fourth spot on this ingredient list is we see wheat flour. Now there are other things in this product that would also lead me to believe that there's gluten. Even if we didn't see the wheat flour in there, the third ingredient, which is modified food starch, could also potentially be gluten. Remember, modified food starch primarily can come from wheat starch. It can also come from corn starch. And although traditionally corn is considered to be a gluten-free grain, if you watch the first video on gluten, you'll see that corn actually does have a gluten in it, and many people do react to that gluten as well. So at any rate, this would be a product that we would want to remove. Obviously it has wheat in it, even though it's soup. A lot of us don't consider soup to contain gluten, but this is one example of a product that would be something we would want to avoid. Now, coming to this next product, this is a can of pineapple chunks, and so you wouldn't consider this to have gluten either, but we want to still always make sure that we double check and we reread our labels. So in this example here, we have pineapple juice, clarified pineapple juice from concentrate, as well as water and citric acid. So those ingredients are all safe, but then the next question that we have to ask, remember, we're going gluten-free for several reasons. We're not just going gluten-free because it's the latest diet craze or the latest fad. We're going gluten-free in terms of improving our health. So, that being said, the next question we have to ask about this product anyway is how healthy really is it? And so the first thing that I'm looking for this product to say is organic. So when we don't see the term organic, this would, although not be a terrible product, wouldn't be the best thing either, and I would really look for something that was organic. As we move through the list, we have a can of tuna fish, and generally tuna fish is just going to contain tuna and water, but a lot more of tuna fish these days, they're adding soybean and soybean oil. So if you have any other allergies, you want to make sure you're looking for that soybean in there. Although it doesn't have anything to do with gluten, it can potentially create a problem for those with soy reactions. So this would be safe on a gluten-free diet. Okay. Moving along, crispy fried onions. This is something that's oftentimes used to bake, especially around Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday times. And so if we look at the ingredients, you can see onions, vegetable oil, wheat, flour, and salt. So once again, canned onions that contain wheat. So this would be one of those items that would be less obvious. It's not so obvious as a block of pasta or as obvious as a loaf of bread, but something we would want to remove. Okay, here's something else we have. And this is a very common diet plan meal, canned or processed meal. So, and then this one, this is chili with beans. And so we're going to flip it over and we're going to look at the ingredients. And we've got water and beef, beans, tomato, additionally chili powder, modified food starch. Again, we're going to find modified food starch in a lot of food items. Once again, modified food starch can come from corn, it can come from wheat, it can come from tapioca, it can come from potato. So there are a lot of potentials for modified food starch. The golden rule here is if it contains modified food starch and you cannot get a confirmation of whether or not that's going to be a grain-based food starch, then you need to go ahead and be cautious and avoid that particular product. So this is one I would avoid. Okay, Jell-O pudding. This is instant Jell-O. And so once again, we're going to flip over and look at the label. Number one ingredient is sugar. Remember what I said a moment ago. The first question you ask yourself when you eat a food is it healthy? Because we're not going gluten-free for any other reason than to improve our health. So this, just right off the bat, is not a healthy product, not something I would be consuming on a regular basis. Number one ingredient, sugar. Number two ingredient, modified food starch. There we see that term again. And as we go down the list, there are a number of other things in this product. Disodium pyrophosphate, tetrasodium pyrophosphate for thickening, mono and diglycerides. And a number of these types of chemicals can often be hidden terms for gluten. So you really, if you're going to even consider eating something like this, you really want to call the food manufacturer, and you want to ask them not if the product is gluten-free, you want to ask them if the product contains specifically, and go down your list of grains, you want to ask them if this product contains any grains. Okay. Up here, looks like we have some different forms of alcohol, and this is always a big question for a lot of people. What alcoholic beverages can I consume? So, in a nutshell, depending on who you ask, some people say that alcohol is safe to consume even if it's derived from grain-based products, and the reason they say that is because the distilling process would take out any gluten. However, that's not 100% entirely true, and a lot of people with gluten intolerance react very severely to the grain-based alcohols. So in a nutshell, the alcohols that are safe to consume, that are non-grain oriented, number one, vodka, if it's potato vodka. Now there are grain-based vodkas, so you want to make sure you delineate the differences. But then you also have tequila, which is derived from the cactus. You have rum, which is derived from sugar cane. You have wine, obviously derived from grape. But beyond that, most of the other alcohols are going to be derived from some form of wheat or other grain base. And in this particular case, well, that's in a foreign language. I can't read it. Let's find something I can read. Well, all we have left here is wine. So, at any rate, if it's a whiskey, if it's a bourbon, if it's a well, let's see, a whiskey, a bourbon, a beer, or some type of ale that's derived from a grain, once again, we want to try to avoid it. Okay, what we've got here is a packaging. It's Crystal Light, and so I'm going to go through the ingredients: citric acid. The third ingredient here is corn syrup solids. Now, once again, many people consider corn syrup, or corn rather, to be gluten-free. Now, my advice is a word of caution. Corn, technically 55% of the protein in corn comes from a gluten, although it is not the same gluten that is in wheat or barley or rye. We still see a lot of people react to corn, so once again, a word of caution. So the second ingredient in this product is corn syrup, and then corn syrup solids, and then also maltodextrin. And maltodextrin is typically also, it's a sugar derived from corn. Another note on corn, not only does corn technically contain gluten, but corn also, 99% of the corn used in processed food items like this one are comprised of genetically modified corn, which means that scientists in these mad chemistry labs have basically taken viral genes and inserted them into the corn so that the corn can produce its own pesticides. These have not been safety tested long enough, and we're already seeing a lot of health problems arise as a result of using genetically modified corn, so it's not something that I would recommend that you do. Okay, now we have mustard. Now, some brands of mustard actually contain gluten. French's, however, does not. The ingredients in this particular mustard: distilled vinegar, water, number 1 grade mustard seed, salt, turmeric, paprika, and spice. Gluten-free, though. Okay, moving along. Manwich. Okay, another common household pantry item. If we flip over and we read the label, we've got tomato puree and high fructose corn syrup. Once again, I do not recommend this for anybody, regardless, gluten or not. High fructose corn syrup is not healthy. Then we have distilled vinegar, and then again corn syrup as another ingredient, and we have the next ingredient as sugar. So you can already see, just in the top 5 ingredients, the top 3 ingredients in this product are sugar of some form or fashion. Not a healthy food to eat, whether you're on a gluten-free diet or not. Don't recommend it. Okay, let's move over to the counter here. Okay, we've got a number of other food items here, and we'll go through these. And these are also all very commonly found household items. This is a muffin mix. It says that it's gluten-free. And you remember that the FDA in the United States says that any food that doesn't have wheat, barley, or rye can classically or can be considered to be a gluten-free food. However, my clinical experience says that we have to look at the other grains potentially as a problem as well, and a number of research studies are now starting to show that that is the case. So if we look at this, we don't want to just trust this symbol. I don't recommend that you just trust that gluten-free symbol. Remember the first 3 questions that we ask about any food that we're going to consume. The first question that we ask is it healthy for me to eat? Is muffin mix healthy to eat? Is this something that you would eat as a staple food on a daily basis and maintain your health with? And the answer to that is obviously no. The second question that we want to ask is this food something I'm allergic to or something I'll react to? And if the answer to that question obviously is yes, then you're going to want to avoid it as well. And then the third question that you really want to ask is this food natural? Is there a laundry list of ingredients? Are there any ingredients on the back of the label that I can't pronounce without a biochemical major? And if the answer to that question is yes, then obviously you want to avoid that particular food as well. So as we look at this one, whole grain millet flour is the #1 ingredient, and we also have whole grain sorghum. Now millet, by concentration, millet has 40% of the protein found in millet is a gluten or a prolamine. And then likewise also with sorghum, about 52% of the protein content found in sorghum is also a prolamine, which is a form of gluten. And although the FDA once again defines gluten as wheat, barley, rye, and sometimes oats, we still want to make sure that we're considering these other grains, because a lot of people, about 40 to 50% of all patients that have been diagnosed with celiac disease don't respond to the traditional gluten-free diet, and one of the reasons why is they're actually getting other forms and other grains that also have gluten, and so they're still really getting exposure to these different glutens that they don't digest very well and that their body reacts to. So this would be one of those products, even though it says gluten-free, it would not be one that I would recommend that you consume. So we're going to put this in the no-go list. And then we have Hamburger Helper. And already we know this one to be, this is one of those obvious ones, Cheeseburger Macaroni. Now, once again, sometimes you're going to find that macaroni say they're gluten-free. In this case, this one is not. This is durum wheat flour, so this is going to go on our no list. Bisquick is another very common item, used to make biscuits, used to make pancakes. And of course, if we look at the ingredients here, we've got wheat flour as the #1 ingredient. But even on another note, we've got partially hydrogenated soybean oil. Well, any hydrogenated fat is something that you're going to want to avoid anyway, just in terms of your overall health. Okay, this product here is a gumbo mix, and we can see the ingredients. #1 ingredient is parboiled rice, and it's fortified with a number of different products. And then as we go down the list, we've got wheat flour. So that right there makes this product a no-go. But then on down as we go down the list, you can see, and I want to point something out here, and that is corn gluten. And so, you know, this is a question that we commonly get asked. If corn is gluten-free, then corn gluten, why do they call it corn gluten? And you'll get 1,000 different answers depending on who you ask. But the real, actual, truthful answer to that question is it's because corn contains gluten. There have been 2 major studies on corn gluten creating damage to the intestines in patients with celiac disease. And both of them were published by the journal Gut. One was in 1983 and another was in 2005. It's not that these other classically considered gluten-free grains are safe. They've never actually been studied to determine their safety. It's a big assumption that we assume that these other grains are safe just because they don't have wheat, barley, and rye. But once again, we want to go back and not assume that they're safe. We want to use common sense and diligence, and we want to eat foods that are healthy. This product here is a multigrain, so let's just have a look on the ingredient label here. 100% natural rolled rye, barley, oats, wheat. So this is another obvious product that we're going to put in the no pile. And then of course pasta. Pasta's in the no pile automatically. And even if you see a corn-based pasta or rice-based pasta, I'm going to recommend those with extreme caution. Once again, corn by percent, 55% of the protein found in corn comes from corn gluten. So it's not something I'm going to recommend. Now here's a big one right here. We can all lower our cholesterol just by eating this one great product, right? Well, not really. But at any rate, Cheerios is a staple in a lot of households in the U.S., and it's made from oat. Now, I know General Mills has come out with a new list of gluten-free cereals that contain whole grains that are going to be probably oat-based and contain rice. I know Rice Chex is another one that came out with a gluten-free label. So Once again, you have to consider that grain contains gluten. So it's not just wheat, barley, and rye, and you have to broaden your scope and broaden your perspective a little if you really want to get healthy. This product is obviously a no-go. It contains oats just as an ingredient. And then when we look at the rest of the ingredient, you can see number 2 ingredient is modified cornstarch, and number 3 ingredient is sugar. That automatically makes it a non-healthy product, and you can bet that that cornstarch is coming from genetically modified corn. And this is one you want your kids to wake up to. And I say that sarcastically. Frosted Flakes. Number 1 ingredient, milled corn. Number 2 ingredient, sugar. Number 3 ingredient, malt. Malt flavoring is derived from barley. So barley being one of the grains that contains gluten, this is going to be one of those examples where you think maybe cornflakes are okay, but if they're sweetened with malt, then now you have this problem because it's got barley in it or barley grain in it. And so even on the FDA recommendation of avoidance of wheat, barley, and rye, this product would be a no-go. So we'll put that in our no pile. Okay, Lay's potato chips. So let's look at our ingredient label here. And so what we've got is we've got potato flakes, sunflower oil, unmodified potato starch, rice flour, and less than 2% of a number of different types of sugars, and then soy. So this has got sugar in it, it's got soy in it. So from a health perspective, probably not the best thing in the world. Of course, we know chips are junk food. But also, if we really want to be particular, and once again, I'm going to mention rice flour because a lot of people consider rice to be gluten-free. Technically, it's not gluten-free. The gluten in rice has not been well studied to be safe, and a number of allergy journals have reported that very same statement. We shouldn't really recommend these other grains because we haven't studied them well enough to determine their safety. Although we do know that rice contains about 5% gluten based on the amount of protein that's in rice. So of all the protein that's in your rice, 5% of that protein is gluten derived. So it's one of those areas where I'm going to caution against. If you want to consume it at your own risk. Quaker Oats, this is another product, and a lot of people consider oatmeal to be gluten-free. And there's two sides to this coin. Some people say oats are gluten-free. Some people say oats are contaminated with gluten. Some people say oats are processed in the same factory with other grains, and therefore that's why they have gluten. But the bottom line is that oats do contain a gluten, and about 16% of the protein in oats is a gluten prolamine. So regardless of who you ask, the truth of the matter is that oats contain a prolamine, which means oats have gluten. And it doesn't matter where they're grown, it doesn't matter what region of France that they process them in, they're going to technically contain gluten, and so I will advise using caution. This product obviously contains gluten, it's bread. And so if we look at the ingredients on just a standard loaf of bread, we've got a ton of different types of grains. We've got wheat, we've got barley flour, we've got wheat gluten added, as well as we've got dough conditioners and a number of other chemical terms that, once again, that the average person doesn't know how to pronounce. So not only from a gluten perspective is this product unsafe for someone on a gluten-free diet, but from a health perspective, this product is unsafe because it has so many chemicals in it that it's just not going to help you maintain or restore your health. Okay. We got some more things in these bags. And I'm going to pull some of these out. We've got a hot cocoa mix. And this hot cocoa mix, if we look at the ingredient, number 1 ingredient is dairy product solids from milk. And then as we go down the list, we have a number of other chemicals, alkali and calcium carbonate and sodium caseinate. And then we have artificial flavors and then sucralose and sodium phosphate. And then we have this disclaimer on the package that says, made on equipment which also processes soy and wheat. This is the manufacturer's way of saying that we can't guarantee that this is a gluten-free product because you can get cross-contamination. Now, beside that fact, it has a number of other different things that could potentially be gluten or could potentially contain gluten-like ingredients. And so when you see the term natural flavors, that's going to be one of those red flags. You're going to want to call the manufacturer on that term, and you're going to want to make sure that if it has that term that you verify whether or not it has or doesn't have gluten. So we're going to put that in the no pile. We're getting a pretty big no pile here, so I'm going to slide everything over and make some room. Okay, what we've got here are some sea salt, cracked pepper, potato chips. So as we flip over and we look at our label here, Number one ingredient, potatoes, sunflower oil, sea salt, corn maltodextrin. So right there, corn maltodextrin. Not only, once again, we look at corn potentially as a gluten-containing grain, but we also look at it as being the number 2 genetically modified food on the planet. And then, of course, genetically modified food is not healthy for human consumption if you want to maintain good quality health. So this is a product I would advise to avoid against. If you want to find a good healthy potato chip that's gluten-free, one of the best things you can do is make your own and bake them. And you can use your own salt and your own vinegar to get that done. There are a number of recipes that you can Google online to find. This product is Kashi. It's a pumpkin spice flax product. It's a granola bar in essence. And it has a number of different types of grains. And I think that's their deal. 7 whole grains on a mission for health. That's a bad mission. But at any rate, it's got buckwheat, oats, brown rice. It's got wheat and rye and triticale and barley. So obviously this would be one of those products that you want to remove from your pantry and put in the no pile list. Okay, so that's a general run-through of some of the more common household items that you're going to find in a pantry that you're going to want to avoid. And so my advice to you in going forward is to take these types of items, put them in bags, and you can do one of two things. You can either take them back to the store if they're unopened to get your money back, or you can donate them to the church and let somebody else benefit from having food if they don't have it, or you can throw it away, the third option, which is maybe a better option. You may be helping that other person out if you just go ahead and throw them away, because a lot of these products aren't healthy anyway, and so why give that to somebody and bring that on them? So take your products like this, bag them up, and get them out of your pantry, and know that from this point forward you're going to want to stock your pantry with food items. If they're processed foods, you want to make sure that the ingredients and the labels have very few ingredients. So as an example, if you buy a spaghetti sauce, you look at your label and look for terms that you understand, terms that you can pronounce. A general rule on reading food labels is if it has more than 5 ingredients, or if any of the terms are not pronounceable unless you practice pronouncing them, then it's probably something that's overly highly processed and you want to avoid it anyway, whether it has gluten in it or whether it doesn't have gluten in it. So you want to stock your pantry with food items that are actually perishable. Because perishable food brings us better health. So you want to get things in your pantry like fresh nuts and seeds. If you want to do some of your own home canning where you can control the ingredients, I recommend that you use mason jars as opposed to canning, because the can linings have these other chemicals, byproducts of the petroleum industry that you don't really want to be exposed to. So this is step 1. Step 1 in going gluten-free is getting the gluten out of your diet. So this will help you get that started. We're going to come next with a tutorial on how to clean out your refrigerator. So stay tuned.